notice, moving along to F, it looks like we have a common denominator, but they are not identical. We need them to look the same. Well, the first one has the 2 first. The second one has the T first. So we need them to be in the same order. So let's reorder the first one by writing the T first. So the top will stay the same. We're not changing anything, just the bottom. And if the T comes first, notice the T is negative, so it should be negative T. The 2 is positive, so plus 2. The second fraction will stay the same. Now notice, we've talked about this before, when your first term is negative, you factor out a negative or a -1. So let's go ahead and do that, and maybe that'll help us do our common denominator. So let's factor out that -1 from the bottom of the first fraction. Remember what that does is it changes the signs of everything on the bottom. So that T, which was negative, becomes positive. And the 2 that was positive becomes negative. So now what we can do is we have something close to our denominator, but we can go ahead and do the math here. We've got a 3 divided by a -1, which is a -3. And then that would leave us with just the T minus 2 on the bottom for that first fraction. That means our second fraction, this guy, the 1 over T minus 2, would not need to change at all because now we would already have a common denominator of T minus 2. So we could keep the denominator as T minus 2 and just go ahead and add and subtract normally, which says we've got a -3 plus 1, which is -2. Be careful. It would be awfully tempting to want to cancel out the 2 -2's, but you can't because that -2 on the bottom is attached to that T. So that they are not identical. You have to leave it as is and you are done with that problem. This is your final answer. On this next one, we have denominators of x plus 3 and x minus 3. They look similar, but they are not the same. Notice that there's no negative sitting out in front of either one that we could just factor out to make them the same. There are 2 completely different denominators. So the only way to get a common denominator is to actually include both of them in the common denominator. So I need to both include x plus 3 and x minus 3. Well, the first fraction already has the x plus 3. It's missing the x minus 3. So we can multiply the top and the bottom by an x minus 3. Well, then that means I would need to multiply out the 4 that's on top to get 4x minus 12. On the second fraction, I have the x minus 3. I'm missing the x plus 3 that would need to go on the top and the bottom. Notice on this one, it would mean that I'm going to distribute not just an x, but a negative x, which would get me a negative x squared minus 3x. But at least I could write it as one big fraction because they would have the same denominators. This would be an x plus 3 and x minus 3. And then all I need to do is combine my like terms. Well, my like terms on this one are, let's see, are only the 4x and the negative 3x. So let's see what that gives me. I've got the negative x squared that should come first in order. The 4x minus 3x is just positive x. And then I've got my negative 12 over my x plus 3 and my x minus 3 also, because that was my common denominator and nothing has canceled out yet. The question would be is, does that top factor at all? If you tried AC method, would actually give you -1 times -12, which would give you 12. And there's no two factors of 12 that would add up to the +1 in the middle. So we are done because nothing factors and cancels, but you do want to put that extra thought into that to make sure it doesn't. So that's it for